The grand opening banner hung proudly above the glass doors. Gerald Thornton stood across the street in torn clothes, his expensive watch hidden in his pocket. He'd come to see his ex-wife Elena fail. Instead, what happened next would break him in ways money never could. Before we dive into this incredible story, I need your help. If you're enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss my next stories. Also, smash that like button and share this video with your friends and family so they can experience these powerful life lessons too. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's continue. Gerald had spent 3 weeks planning this moment. 3 weeks of watching construction crews transform the old building on Fifth Avenue into Elena's dream restaurant. 3 weeks of bitterness growing in his chest like poison. Every morning, he'd instructed his driver to pass by the construction site. Every evening, he checked social media for updates about the opening. He adjusted the dirty baseball cap lower over his face and leaned against the brick wall across from Esperanza's, the name Elena had chosen for her restaurant. It meant hope in Spanish. Gerald sneered at the irony. Hope was for people who had nothing else. Gerald had everything: money, power, influence. Hope was something he'd left behind years ago. 5 years ago, Elena had been his wife. Beautiful, ambitious Elena Rodriguez, who worked double shifts at her family's small taqueria while taking business classes at night. Gerald had loved her energy, her dreams, her fire. She'd believed in him when his tech startup was just an idea scribbled on napkins. She'd encouraged him through countless failures, celebrated every small victory, and never complained when he worked through holidays. But that was before his startup exploded into a billion-dollar empire. That was before Forbes featured him on their cover. That was before the invitations to exclusive galas started arriving daily. After the money came, everything changed. Gerald started attending exclusive events, meeting powerful people who whispered that Elena didn't fit his new world. She spoke with an accent. Her family ran a struggling restaurant in a working-class neighborhood. She didn't understand opera or wine tastings or the politics of high society. At charity auctions, she'd ask why anyone would pay $50,000 for dinner when that money could actually feed people who needed it. His business partners would smile politely at Elena, then pull Gerald aside. "She's charming," they'd say with condescending tones. "Very authentic. But Gerald, you're building an empire. You need someone who understands these circles, someone who can help you navigate this world." The divorce had been brutal. Gerald's lawyers were ruthless, finding loopholes in their prenuptial agreement, arguing that Elena hadn't contributed to the business success despite her emotional and moral support during the early years. Elena got a small settlement, nothing compared to his wealth. Gerald had made sure of that. He'd wanted her to know what leaving his world meant. "She wanted to drag me down," Gerald told his friends at the country club, swirling expensive scotch in crystal glasses. "I gave her a chance to grow with me, but she couldn't leave her old life behind. She was too attached to her family's struggling little taco stand." But Gerald left out important details: how he'd stopped coming home for dinner because her cooking wasn't sophisticated enough for his refined palate. How he'd mocked her accent in front of his business partners, laughing when they imitated the way she pronounced certain words. How he'd told her that her dreams of opening a restaurant were quaint and unrealistic, and suggested she take up golf or interior design instead, something more appropriate for a billionaire's wife. Elena had signed the divorce papers without fighting. That had surprised him. He'd expected tears, begging, drama. He'd prepared himself to feel powerful watching her beg him not to leave. Instead, she'd looked at him with sad eyes and said quietly, "I hope you find whatever you're looking for, Gerald. I really do, because what we had clearly wasn't it." Those words had haunted him more than he wanted to admit. Now, watching the crowd gather for the grand opening, Gerald felt that old anger resurface. How dare she succeed without him? How dare she smile like that, greeting guests in a beautiful red dress, looking happier than he'd ever seen her during their marriage? How dare she build something that people actually seemed excited about? He'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Elena had scraped together money from her family, taken out loans that put everything at risk, and worked with a business partner she'd met through community college classes. The restaurant had been her obsession for 2 years. She'd worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, learning every aspect of the business from accounting to menu design to kitchen management. Gerald planned to enjoy watching it fail. Restaurants failed all the time. Everyone knew that. The statistics were brutal, especially in this economy, especially in this neighborhood where gentrification hadn't quite taken hold, especially with an inexperienced owner who had more heart than business sense. He gave it 6 months, maybe a year if she was lucky. Then she'd realize what he'd known all along, that dreams without his money and connections were just fantasies. But first, he wanted to see her reaction to him. He wanted her to know he'd come, that he'd witnessed her little moment, that he didn't care. He wanted her to see him across the street and realize that even on her biggest day, he was indifferent. The homeless disguise had been his assistant Jennifer's idea, though she'd suggested it sarcastically after Gerald announced his plan to accidentally show up at the opening. "Why don't you just dress as a homeless person?" Jennifer had said, rolling her eyes while organizing his schedule. "Really commit to being petty. Maybe carry a sign. Make it a whole production." Gerald had stared at her, and Jennifer had immediately backtracked. "Sir, I was joking. Please don't actually." But Gerald had taken the suggestion seriously. If he showed up in his usual Tom Ford suit, arriving in his Bentley with his driver opening the door, Elena would think he still cared, that he was threatened by her success. She might even think he'd come to support her, which would be unbearable. But as a homeless man, he'd be invisible. He could observe without her knowing. He could witness her moment and remain completely detached from it. The irony was delicious. The billionaire reduced to rags, watching his ex-wife's little restaurant dream. It felt poetic somehow. Jennifer had tried to talk him out of it. "Mr. Thornton, this isn't healthy. Maybe you should just focus on your own life instead of—" "I pay you to manage my schedule, Jennifer, not to psychoanalyze me." "Yes, sir, but for the record, this is a terrible idea." Gerald had purchased the disguise carefully. Not costume shop theatrical poverty, but real, worn clothes from a thrift store. Jeans with authentic stains and fraying hems. A jacket that actually smelled like someone had lived in it. Shoes that had walked too many miles. He'd even stopped shaving for 3 days, letting stubble shadow his usually clean-shaven face. Now, standing across the street, he felt ridiculous but committed. Guests continued arriving. Gerald recognized some faces from Elena's old neighborhood. Her parents, aged but smiling proudly, her father's arm around her mother's waist. Her younger brother Carlos, now grown, tall and confident, helping guests at the door. Her Aunt Maria, her cousin Roberto. The crowd was diverse, working-class families, mixed with what looked like food critics and local business owners, and young people dressed in trendy clothes who'd probably seen the restaurant featured in some hip online publication. Gerald checked his phone. His driver was parked 2 blocks away in a parking garage, ready to pick him up whenever he'd seen enough. "Give me 90 minutes, Gerald had told him. "That should be plenty of time to watch this disaster unfold." But 90 minutes had already passed, and the disaster hadn't materialized. If anything, the crowd was growing. People were actually waiting for tables, gathering outside the door, laughing and excited. Gerald felt his jaw tighten. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. A little girl, maybe 7 years old with ribbons in her hair, broke away from her parents and ran toward the restaurant. She wasn't watching where she was going, mesmerized by the lights and decorations in the window. She stumbled on the curb, her arms pinwheeling, trying to catch herself. Her ice cream cone flew from her hand and splattered on the sidewalk in a pink mess. The girl started crying immediately, loud sobs that carried across the street. Her parents were still on the other side of the road, stuck waiting for traffic to clear, unable to reach her quickly. Gerald watched, expecting someone from the restaurant staff to handle it. A manager, a host, someone paid to deal with these situations. Instead, Elena herself emerged from the entrance. She must have seen the whole thing through the glass doors. She didn't hesitate, Didn't call for an employee. She just moved immediately to the child. She knelt beside the crying girl, her beautiful red dress touching the dirty sidewalk without hesitation. Gerald noticed she was wearing heels, too. Expensive ones that couldn't be comfortable for someone who'd been standing all evening. But she knelt anyway, bringing herself to the child's eye level. "Hey, sweetie, it's okay. Accidents happen to everyone. My ice cream," the girl sobbed, pointing at the pink puddle. "It's ruined." "I know," Elena said gently, her voice carrying that warmth Gerald remembered from years ago. "That's really sad. I'd be upset too. But guess what? Inside my restaurant, we have the most amazing chocolate cake you've ever tasted. It's warm and gooey, and we can put ice cream on top. Would you like a piece? Free, just for you. My gift to celebrate our opening." The girl's tears slowed, interrupted by hiccups. "Really? For free?" "Really. And you can have extra whipped cream if you want. And rainbow sprinkles. We have those too. Come on, let's get you cleaned up first, okay? I bet you have sticky hands now." She stood, holding the girl's hand carefully, and that's when she noticed Gerald across the street. Their eyes met across the busy road. Recognition flickered across her face slowly, confusion mixing with surprise. She tilted her head slightly, studying him, trying to reconcile the man she'd known with the homeless figure leaning against the wall. Gerald's heart pounded. He looked away quickly, hunching his shoulders, trying to become invisible. But it was too late. The girl's parents arrived, flustered and apologetic, thanking Elena profusely for her kindness. Elena smiled at them, assured them it was no problem, but kept glancing back across the street at Gerald. He could feel her gaze even when he wasn't looking directly at her. Finally, she said something to the parents, gesturing toward the restaurant entrance. They nodded and took their daughter inside, the little girl already smiling again, excited about the promised cake. Elena looked both ways carefully, waiting for a gap in traffic. Then she crossed the street, walking directly toward Gerald with purpose in her stride. Gerald considered running, just turning and walking away quickly, disappearing into the evening crowd. But his pride wouldn't let him. Running would mean he cared. Running would mean she had power over him. So he stayed. "Gerald?" Her voice was soft, uncertain, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. "Is that really you?" He could deny it, should deny it, could claim she had him confused with someone else, that he was just a homeless man looking for handouts. Instead, something in her tone, something gentle and genuinely concerned, made him meet her eyes. "Hello, Elena." She stared at him, taking in the torn jacket, the dirty jeans, the baseball cap pulled low, the 3-day stubble. Her expression shifted through several emotions: confusion, shock, concern, and finally understanding. "What are you doing here? And why are you dressed like that? Does it matter?" Gerald tried to sound cold, dismissive, but his voice came out weaker than he intended. "Of course it matters," Elena said, stepping closer. "Gerald, what happened? Are you okay? Did something happen to your business? Did you lose everything?" The genuine concern in her voice caught him completely off guard. She actually thought he'd fallen on hard times. She thought the disguise was real, that he'd somehow lost his fortune and ended up on the streets. And instead of satisfaction or gloating, her face showed only worry. The idea should have been funny. It should have given him some satisfaction that she'd believed it, even for a moment. But somehow, standing there seeing authentic compassion in her eyes for the man who'd treated her so cruelly, Gerald felt something crack inside his chest. "I'm fine," he said curtly, looking away. "Congratulations on your restaurant. It's very nice." Elena studied his face carefully, her eyes moving from his expression to his posture to his hands. "You came to see the opening?" "I was in the neighborhood. Dressed like a homeless person?" "Gerald, don't lie to me. I was married to you for 6 years. I know when you're lying." Gerald said nothing. Elena's expression shifted again from concern to understanding, then to something that looked like profound disappointment. Her shoulders sagged slightly. "You came to watch me fail, didn't you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Her voice wasn't angry, just infinitely sad, tired even. "You couldn't stand the idea that I might succeed without you, without your money and your connections. So you came here tonight, disguised like this so you could observe from a distance. Watch me crash and burn. Prove to yourself that I needed you after all. You're being dramatic. Am I? Elena crossed her arms. Gerald, you're wearing a designer watch under that dirty sleeve. I can see the edge of it. That's a Patek Philippe if I'm not mistaken. The same one you were wearing in that Forbes photo shoot 6 months ago. And those shoes, even covered in mud, are Bruno Magli's. You really think I wouldn't recognize them? I was married to you. I know your wardrobe better than you do. Gerald felt exposed, foolish, like a child caught in an obvious lie. So what if I came? It's a free country. I can stand on a public street. You're absolutely right. It is a free country. You can stand wherever you want. Elena paused, seeming to make a decision. Are you hungry? What? Have you eaten dinner? Come inside, let me feed you. Gerald laughed harshly. I don't need your pity, Elena. It's not pity, Elena said calmly. It's dinner. I feed everyone who comes to my restaurant. That's the whole point of having a restaurant. That's what hope means. Feeding people, nourishing them, giving them something real and good. I came here to see you fail. I know, Elena said simply, without malice or anger. Come inside anyway. She turned and walked back toward the restaurant, not checking if he followed, not pressuring him, just offering and then leaving the choice to him. Gerald stood there for a long moment, watching her cross the street. Everything in him screamed to walk away, to call his driver, to go back to his penthouse and forget this entire ridiculous evening. But then Elena reached the restaurant door and held it open, looking back at him across the street. She didn't wave or gesture. She just waited, the warm light from inside spilling out around her silhouette. And despite everything, despite his pride and his anger and his carefully constructed reasons for being here, Gerald found himself crossing the street. The restaurant was packed. Every table was full of laughing, talking people. Servers moved gracefully between tables carrying plates that looked and smelled incredible. The bar was 3 deep with people waiting for drinks. Music played softly in the background, something Latin and warm. The smell of food filled the air, rich and complex, making Gerald's stomach growl despite himself, despite his expensive breakfast and his carefully planned indifference. The decor was simple but warm and intentional. Exposed brick painted white, wooden tables that looked handmade, plants hanging from the ceiling in terracotta pots, photographs on the walls showing what looked like Elena's family history, generations of faces, old wedding photos, children playing, family gatherings. There was a mural on one wall painted in bright colors, showing a landscape that Gerald recognized as Elena's home village in Mexico, a place she'd taken him once early in their marriage, when everything was still good. Elena led him through the crowd to a small table in the back corner, away from the main gathering, tucked beside the kitchen door. Sit, she instructed gently. I'll bring you something. Elena, I don't. Just sit, Gerald, please. He sat. Around him the party continued, swirling with energy and joy. He watched Elena move through the crowd, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, laughing genuinely at something someone said. She looked happy. She looked free. She looked more vibrant and alive than he remembered her being during their entire marriage. When had she stopped laughing like that with him? Had she ever laughed like that? Or had he just never noticed? A young man, mid-20s with kind eyes and an easy smile, approached Gerald's table carrying a plate carefully with both hands. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm Elena's business partner and head chef. He set down the plate with clear pride. The food looked incredible, beautifully plated with colors that made Gerald's mouth water despite his anger and his confusion. The presentation was restaurant quality, the kind of thing you'd see in establishments charging $200 per person. Elena said you were a special guest, Daniel continued, his tone warm and welcoming without being obsequious. This is our signature dish, braised short ribs with mole sauce, roasted vegetables with a lime cilantro glaze, and fresh corn tortillas made by hand by Elena's mother. Gerald stared at the food. Her mother made these? She's here? She's in the kitchen right now, Has been since 4 this morning, actually. This restaurant is a complete family operation. Elena's father manages the bar. Her brother Carlos handles the business side, accounting and marketing and all that. And Elena's mother, Senora Rosa, she's the heart of everything we make. Every recipe, every spice blend, every technique, it all comes through her first. Daniel smiled genuinely. Enjoy your meal, sir, and welcome to Esperanza's. I hope tonight is the first of many visits. As Daniel walked away to greet other guests, Gerald looked down at the plate. Steam rose from the food carrying complex aromas. Slowly, reluctantly, curious despite himself, he picked up his fork. The first bite was extraordinary. The meat was impossibly tender, falling apart at the slightest touch of his fork. The mole sauce was complex beyond anything he'd expected. Layers of flavor that revealed themselves slowly. Chocolate and chili and something smoky and something bright. It reminded him powerfully of the early days with Elena, when she'd cook for him in their tiny apartment, experimenting with her family's recipes, feeding him bites from wooden spoons, laughing when he got sauce on his shirt. When had they stopped cooking together? When had Elena's food become not sophisticated enough for him? He ate slowly, mechanically, each bite bringing memories he'd thought he'd buried. The party noise faded into background sound. He was alone with his thoughts and his regrets, and a plate of food that tasted like everything he'd lost and never properly valued. Elena returned 20 minutes later, sliding into the seat across from him. Her red dress swished softly as she sat. She looked tired now, the long day showing in her eyes, but still happy, still glowing with something Gerald hadn't felt in years. "Well?" she asked simply. "It's good," Gerald admitted quietly, setting down his fork. "Just good?" "It's exceptional. You know it is. This is better than half the Michelin-starred places I've eaten at. You've created something really special here, Elena." Elena smiled, and for a moment, he saw the woman he'd fallen in love with so many years ago. "I do know, but it's nice to hear you say it anyway." They sat in silence for a moment. Gerald pushed the empty plate aside, every bite consumed. "Why are you being nice to me? After everything I did, after the divorce, after tonight, why bring me inside and feed me?" "Because I learned something important after our divorce, Gerald." "What's that?" "I learned that carrying anger and bitterness doesn't hurt the person you're angry at. It only hurts you. It poisons everything you touch." She gestured around the restaurant, at the full tables and laughing guests. "Building this place, creating this community, that was my healing. Every brick, every recipe, every decision, every late-night planning and every early morning cooking. I poured all that pain into creation instead of destruction." "I destroyed you," Gerald said, the words catching painfully in his throat. "In the divorce, with the lawyers, with the way I talked about you to people afterward. I tried to make you nothing." "You tried to," Elena corrected gently but firmly, "but you didn't succeed, because I wouldn't let you. I decided that your opinion of me, your judgment, your estimation of my worth, none of it defined who I actually was." Gerald felt something crack deeper inside his chest, something he'd been holding rigid for 5 years. He'd spent all that time believing Elena was weak, that he'd won, that moving on without her had been progress, proof of his strength. But sitting here now, seeing her actual strength, her restaurant, her community, her genuine happiness, he realized the devastating truth. He'd been the weak one. He'd run away from real love because it required vulnerability. He'd chosen power over connection, pride over partnership. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "God, Elena, I'm so sorry for everything." She reached across the table and touched his hand briefly, just for a moment. Her skin was warm. "I know, and I forgive you, Gerald." "Just like that?" "Just like that. Not for you, though. For me. Because holding on to anger about what you did would poison everything I've built here. It would taint every meal I cook, every guest I welcome, every moment of joy. I refuse to let you have that power over me anymore. Tears welled in Gerald's eyes. When was the last time he'd cried? He couldn't remember. Years. Maybe not since he was a child. Certainly not since becoming successful. Successful men didn't cry. Billionaires didn't show weakness. But he was crying now. "I don't know who I became," he said, wiping his eyes roughly with the sleeve of his fake homeless jacket. "After the money, after the success and the Forbes covers and the galas, I thought I had to be someone different. Someone harder. Someone who didn't have feelings or weakness or needs. And how's that working out for you?" Elena asked, her tone gentle, not mocking. Gerald laughed, but it came out as something between a laugh and a sob. "Terribly. I'm absolutely miserable. I'm surrounded by hundreds of people who want something from me. Business deals or investments or access to other wealthy people. I work 18-hour days building companies I don't even care about, just to prove I can. I date women who look perfect on paper, who photograph well at events, but who I can't actually talk to about anything real. And I've systematically pushed away everyone who actually knew me, who actually cared about the person I was before." Elena was quiet for a moment, letting his words hang in the air. Then she said softly, "It's not too late to change, you know." "Isn't it? I've burned so many bridges. I've hurt so many people. I don't even know where I'd start." "No, it's never too late as long as you're still breathing. But it starts with being honest. With yourself first, then with the people around you. With what you actually want from life instead of what you think you're supposed to want." Gerald looked around the restaurant again, really seeing it this time. The families sharing meals. The couples holding hands across tables. The groups of friends laughing together. Elena's parents behind the bar, working side by side like they probably had for 40 years. The community she'd built. "You did this," he said quietly. "You built this dream you always talked about. The place where people feel welcome, where food brings people together, where everyone matters." "We did this," Elena corrected, gesturing to her family, to Daniel, to the staff moving through the restaurant. "I couldn't have done it alone. That's another thing I learned, Gerald. Letting people help you isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Real strength isn't about standing alone at the top. It's about building something together." She stood up, smoothing her dress. "I need to get back to my guests. It's our opening night and I should be present for it. But Gerald, you're welcome to stay if you want. Have dessert, meet people, or you can leave. Either way, I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for." She started to walk away, back toward the crowded dining room, but Gerald called after her. "Elena?" She turned, patient, waiting. "Can I help?" "Help with what?" "With anything. Dishes, clearing tables, taking out trash, I don't care. I just don't want to go back to my empty penthouse right now. I can't face that tonight." Elena studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she smiled. "Come on, follow me." She led him through the swinging kitchen door into organized chaos. The kitchen was hot and loud, full of movement and Spanish rapid fire between cooks. Her mother Rosa stood at a large prep table, rolling dough for tortillas with practiced efficiency, her hands moving in rhythms battered over decades. When Rosa saw Gerald, her expression hardened immediately. Her hands stopped moving. "Mama," Elena said in Spanish, "Gerald would like to help tonight. Can you show him how to roll tortillas properly?" Rosa looked at her daughter like she'd completely lost her mind. "This man, the one who broke your heart, who said terrible things about our family, who made you cry for months?" "The same," Elena replied calmly in English so Gerald could understand. "And I think he needs to learn something important tonight." Rosa studied Gerald with sharp, evaluating eyes. She'd never liked him, he remembered. Even during the marriage, she'd been polite but distant, like she could see something in him that others missed. Finally, she nodded curtly. "Come here, boy. Wash your hands first in that sink. Very hot water, lots of soap. I don't let dirty hands touch my dough." For the next 3 hours, Gerald worked in that kitchen harder than he'd worked in years. He rolled tortillas under Rosa's strict instruction, being told repeatedly that his technique was wrong, his pressure uneven, his circles not round enough. "No, no, no," Rosa would say, shaking her head. "Like this, watch. Gentle but firm, respect the dough or it will never respect you back. He washed dishes alongside Carlos, who barely spoke to him except to point out where clean dishes should be stacked. He chopped vegetables for tomorrow's prep, learning to make Elena's mother's famous salsa, a recipe that had apparently been in the family for 4 generations. His back ached from standing. His hands got burned from hot pans and splattered with oil. The kitchen heat made him sweat through his disguise clothes until they were soaked. His feet hurt in the fake worn shoes. His arms trembled from exhaustion. And somehow, inexplicably, it was the most alive he'd felt in years. Nobody asked about his money. Nobody cared about his business deals or his connections or who he knew. Rosa yelled at him for not washing a pot properly. Carlos rolled his eyes when Gerald didn't understand kitchen slang. Daniel patiently showed him 3 times how to properly store vegetables in the walk-in cooler. For 3 hours, Gerald was just a person helping in a restaurant kitchen. Not a billionaire, not a success story, just someone learning how to roll tortillas. Around midnight, the last guest finally left reluctantly, still laughing and making plans to return. The staff began the closing routine, cleaning and organizing for tomorrow. Gerald found himself sitting on a milk crate in the alley behind the restaurant, too exhausted to move, his fake homeless clothes now authentically dirty from honest work. Elena found him there, still in her red dress but with an apron over it now, her hair coming loose from its pins. She handed him a bottle of cold water. "You actually stayed." "I did." "Why? Why didn't you just leave after dinner?" Gerald thought about it, drinking the water slowly. "Because tonight, in your kitchen, nobody cared about my money, or my companies, or who I knew, or where I'd been featured. Your mother yelled at me for not rolling the dough thin enough. Your brother ignored me completely unless I asked questions. And it was the most real, the most genuinely human I've felt in 5 years." Elena sat down beside him on another milk crate, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know," Gerald admitted. "But I know I can't go back to who I was. That person was empty. Successful, but completely empty inside." Success isn't the problem, Gerald. How you measure it is. What you sacrifice to get it. Who you become in the pursuit of it. They sat in comfortable silence, the city sounds around them, traffic and distant music and the ambient hum of urban life. Finally, Gerald spoke. "I lost everything tonight." "What do you mean?" "I lost my pride, my anger, my certainty that I was right about everything. I lost the story I told myself about how the divorce was your fault, how you held me back, how leaving you was the smart business decision." He looked at her. "You destroyed all of that tonight, by being kind when I came here hoping for your failure, by feeding me when I deserved nothing from you, by succeeding without revenge or bitterness, by showing me what real strength actually looks like." Elena smiled. "Good. You needed to lose all those things. But I'm empty now. Everything I built myself on is gone." "No," she said gently. "You're not empty. You're finally ready to be filled with something better, something real, instead of all those illusions you were carrying." 6 months later, Gerald walked into Esperanza's on a Tuesday evening. The restaurant was busy but not packed, the comfortable buzz of a successful establishment that no longer needed to prove itself. He'd made a reservation under his real name this time. Elena spotted him from across the dining room and came over, smiling warmly. "Gerald, good to see you." "Hi, Elena. Is this okay? Me being here?" "Of course. You're always welcome here. You know that." She led him to a table by the window, and they talked briefly before she had to attend to other guests. Gerald ordered his usual now, the short ribs with mole sauce. While he waited, he thought about the changes in his life over these past months. He'd restructured his companies, bringing in managers who shared operational responsibilities and decision-making. He'd started a foundation focused on helping immigrant entrepreneurs start food businesses, providing no-interest loans and mentorship programs. He'd reached out to old friends he'd abandoned when he got wealthy, apologizing, trying to rebuild bridges. And every Tuesday evening, without fail, he came to Esperanza's. Sometimes he ate alone, reading or answering emails. Sometimes Elena joined him if she had time, sitting across from him talking about books or movies or neighborhood gossip. They'd never gotten back together romantically. That door had closed permanently, sealed by too much hurt. But they'd built something different, maybe something better. A friendship based on mutual respect and growth. Rosa no longer glared at him. She'd actually smiled last week when his tortilla came out perfectly round. The food arrived, carried by a new server Gerald hadn't met yet, and he savored every bite slowly. When Elena stopped by his table later, coffee in hand, he said, "Thank you." For what? For that night 6 months ago. For destroying who I was so I could become who I needed to be. Elena squeezed his shoulder gently before moving to check on other tables. You destroyed yourself, Gerald. You did the work. I just gave you a safe place to do it. As she walked away to greet other guests, Gerald realized she was right. That night outside her rocha, dressed as a homeless man, expecting to witness her failure, planning to feel superior and vindicated, he'd found his own failure instead. He'd discovered how empty his success had been, how hollow his pride, how worthless his wealth without connection or purpose or genuine human feeling. And somehow, that failure had saved his life. He'd come to watch her dream crumble. Instead, she'd shown him that real success wasn't measured in billions or status or Forbes covers. It was measured in full tables and honest work and family recipes passed down through generations, and the courage to forgive when forgiveness seemed impossible. Gerald had lost everything that night outside Esperanza's. Every illusion, every false measure of worth, every protective wall he'd built around his heart. And in losing it all, he'd finally found himself again.